That's Jam Band Cleve. Thank you. You better get some on. Good tone there, Ed. Yeah.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Good morning and welcome to Old Town Cleveland here on WOOP FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.woopfm.com. You can call us here at 614-5553. Good morning, Morgan, and good morning, Debbie Moore. Tell me what's going on.
Good morning, Ron. It's April the 15th, 2017 already, the day before Easter. It's a beautiful day.
Today's tax day, but officially you get to go to Monday. I
think of Easter. Ron thinks of tax day. Okay. And we have some very special guests here in the studio with us this morning. We have three guys that were DJs at WFLI in the 1960s and 70s, and we're going to have a great time talking with them today. And you can always call in with your memories of listening to them in the 60s. I remember you guys because you cost me a lot of C-size batteries, because I'd have to have C-size batteries to lay out in the sun with my red plastic radio and listen to you guys. Hey, Ron, would you like to introduce our guests?
Do what? We were talking over here. We didn't pay no attention to you. Yeah. We got Bill Miller, Rick Govin, Johnny Eagle, and one of them called Ringo Van. There he is.
The Music Man.
The Music Man.
Yeah.
Boy, I tell you, growing up, I remember you guys, and we were probably about all the same age. You may be a year or two older. And I was at Bradley High School, and you come out and you turned on your car radio, and it was on JetFly, going home, coming to school.
During algebra class?
Yeah, well, yeah, if we could, you know. I might as well have been listening in algebra class because it didn't make sense either. So, good morning, guys. How are you?
Great. Good to be here. What year was that you graduated?
I graduated in 1972 from Bradley Central High School.
Okay.
And that was great days, and I remember all those guys that you worked with, Del Anthony and a few other of those guys along the way. And, of course, we all remember Tommy Jett I seen Tommy down in McDonald not too long ago, hyping his book.
Yeah. Or his album.
Oh, I hadn't heard his album, but I've got his book, so and he's a lot of fun. So
I know I went to Bradley at least twice to give something away like that. WFLI Football Team of the Week award, or
yes.
something like that.
Yeah.
Probably when you were in school, if you graduated in '72.
Well, I was there, and I think that's the year I graduated. It's been so long.
Are you sure?
Morgan, when do you graduate? Tell us.
I graduate May 20th this year, and can't get here sooner.
Okay, and Morgan, you and some of your people from Bradley High School won a contest this week. Tell us what you did.
Okay, so me along with three of my fellow classmates competed in the Skills USA Broadcast News Production Contest in Chattanooga.
Cool.
We went to Chattanooga State. We basically wrote a script, filmed a 3-minute on-the-dot newscast, and we ended up getting gold. So, yeah. It was also, I'd also like to say it was an honor to compete with the other schools as well, at Coffee County and Cleveland. Really nice to meet all of them. Really great people. Loved them to death. And, yeah.
Congratulations.
Great. That's great. He's done a great job, and we told him when he come here to do radio, we were going to teach him how not to do radio. Yeah. So, me too.
Well, you're looking at three guys of how not to do radio.
I made a career out of not doing radio while working on a radio paycheck.
For most of our listeners out there who tend to be a little more our age, and
Mature.
and know what Morgan's group of people are not up yet. But 50,000 watts on an AM station. I mean, you were top dog in the region. How far did that go out, Johnny?
Oh, Lord. We got mail from Ohio, Florida, down in Panama City, as far down there. But then that was just a fluke. You got to be a little more directional, don't you?
Yeah.
But from all over, man. I mean, and every once in a while you'd get a skip from a foreign country.
So, it was just unbelievable. And so, Johnny, tell us when you went to work.
In April of 1961, WFLI went on the air February 20th, 1961, and I joined them about the middle of the month of April.
And how long did you stay?
Which time?
Yeah, which time? No, I was there basically through 1982.
Basically the rock and roll years.
Right.
So, and then after that, it sort of... Now, when did Mr. Ben sell the radio station?
When did he sell it?
Yes.
He hasn't.
Oh, he hasn't? Okay,
No,
I didn't know
no.
if he had sold it or not.
No.
Because it changed formats somewhere along that time.
It changed formats in 1980, went to country, and in 1982, it switched over to religion.
Gospel mostly.
And gospel music.
Yeah.
And it stayed that way until its most recent sign-off.
What was 82 or 80, was that the big push for FM coming in?
Yes.
Then?
Yeah. KZ come in and kind of took care of our lunch.
Yeah, they did. Big change, but you were the dominant. Now, when did you work there? Ring gold?
Johnny hired me in the fall of 1964. I was a freshman at then the University of Chattanooga. And I was there for 5 years until I graduated, and I moved on.
What shift did you run?
I was all over. I started as a weekend guy, and mostly during that 5-year stint, I was doing weekends and a lot of fill-ins for vacations and sicknesses. And then the last couple of years, I was on regular. I think I was on a noon to 3 shift, and then sometimes it was a 6 to 9 or both of those or whatever.
Did you have DJs 24 hours a day?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We did.
None of this electronic
We did.
stuff like we do now.
No computers. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jay. Go ahead.
We're not that sophisticated. But tell them how you came to be at Fly to begin with.
Well, I went to my uncle owned a station in South Pittsburgh, WEPG AM, station that had been prominent in that community for many, many years. And I had done a little work down there when I was in high school. I lived nearby in Sewanee. So when I came to the university, I needed a part-time job. I needed a job, and I walked from the campus down to WDXB radio. That was a competitor of Fly's, and that was just 3 or 4 blocks from the campus. And the station manager there, Jerry Lingerfelt, interviewed me, and I did a demo or something and audition, and he said, we don't have a weekend opening, but let me call over at WFLI. And he called Johnny, and Johnny said, we happen to have an opening, and if you can send this guy over here, we'll check him out. I didn't have a car. I had walked downtown, so I hitchhiked from downtown Chattanooga, 3 or 4 rides along the way, all the way around Lookout Mountain. The freeway had not yet opened, and ended up walking from somewhere on Browns Ferry Road into O'Grady Drive, where the studio was at the foot of Elder Mountain, hot, out of breath, and walked in, and they said, well, come on back and do the audition. And somehow I managed to fake it and get on. Yeah. Kind of a cool story.
Bill, tell us your story real quick.
About how I got there?
Yeah.
The Starview Drive-In, that was the name of the drive-in here, right?
Yes.
Starview Drive-In had a big role in that. I had just graduated from Polk County High School. I was 18, and I had enrolled at Carson Newman and college in Jefferson City, and I was on a break, and I came back, and I went to see a movie, and I think it was The 10 Commandments, which has been re-released. I believe that's what it was. And I went with a couple of high school friends of mine, Melvin Davis and Alan Frady. And while I was at Carson Newman, I had been working in high school, so I had 2 or 3 years of part-time experience. And I was working nights in Morristown. And we went to the Starview Drive-In to compare notes of the things that had happened since we got out of high school a few months earlier. And I believe it was Melvin who said, I saw an ad in the Chattanooga newspaper for a part-time weekend announcer DJ at JetFly. And I said, well, I could get that job. Not believing in it ever that I could possibly get it. But anyway, I went back to Morristown, put a tape together when the weekend was over, sent it to JetFly, and Johnny hired me as a weekend guy. And then 9 months later, I was doing afternoon drive, working full time. So if it wasn't for the Starview Drive-In and nothing to do in Polk County and Delano, I probably would have never made it to JetFly.
There's a lot of other things happening at the Starview we will not talk about today. There's a lot of other families got their starts here. See, that's something you don't understand either.
Oh, I think he does.
Now, let me ask you this tough question. You know, those first days of radio, you know, this was a big radio station and everything, and you guys were big stars. You were thinking. So I imagine you were making thousands of dollars a week.
Wrong.
What did you start out as, Bill?
I started around $10,000 a week.
Yeah, and if you believe that, he's got some property in Arizona, oceanfront.
So the minimum wage was what back into those days?
Whatever it was, I guess.
Well, it was around $1, I guess, wasn't it?
I know that when I started at the Etowah station when I was a sophomore in high school, the minimum wage was 75 cents. Wow. And at some point, John Blair, who's a terrific guy, one of the owners and the manager, came to me and said, "You've got a bigger paycheck this week. We're giving you a dime raise." And it took me about 6 months to realize the minimum wage had gone from 75 cents to 85 cents an hour.
So what was the money big at WFLI?
Well, it was pretty big to me at the time. Johnny, was the money big? You signed the paychecks.
Johnny's was.
No, believe it or not,
No, the money was.
I didn't.
Let me just get that on the table.
I didn't look at that stuff as an hourly because when I joined the station, I was working in a little station that's still on the air down in Fort Payne, Alabama. I referred to it as Fort Misery, but still it was WFPA down there. Anyway, I was making $56 a week at that little station. So coming to JetFly in April of '61, I jumped to $66 a week, and I thought I had just landed in heaven. Wow. So I didn't look at it. I didn't look at it as hourly as much as because I could have almost paid them to let me work there because that was such an improvement.
Oh yeah,
because it was everything. All the equipment was brand new, studio was brand new, everything was new. And coming from a little station in Fort Payne, they didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have cart machines. It was all reel to reel. Yeah. If you recorded a spot, you had to cue it up reel to reel. Of course, guys that are starting in radio today are looking at this and saying even the cart machines was antiquated.
Right.
But we thought, having a continuous cart and it stopped when it's supposed to, man, you were in heaven.
It would. I'm sorry, John.
Go ahead.
When I started full time in the fall, I bought a car. I bought a brand new Dodge Challenger, 4-barrel. Got 3 or 4 miles to the gallon on a good day, and I had a really nice apartment in Red Bank that I shared with Barry J., who was the all-night guy. So we didn't see each other, but we had a nice 2-bedroom apartment. I took the first 10% of my net pay each week and put it in the bank. I did have car payments. And I had all the best clothes that C&D Clothing had to offer.
Yeah, buddy.
So we weren't making a fortune, but we lived pretty well. Unless you squandered the money, you lived pretty well.
That's good money. What about you, Rico?
Well, Johnny allowed me to supplement the salary. I also sold radio time. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of confused on how much I was paid as a DJ and then what I received from spots that I sold. But I remember something, we were talking about that, I just remembered a conversation that Bud Bell was from Polk County.
The Polk County Bell
And
Ring.
he was a weekend engineer for us.
Yeah. Started out as that.
Started out as a weekend engineer. He's kind of a legend at WFLI, just a great guy. Rode the bus, I think, from Delano to
He may have.
Tiftonia.
Yeah, when there was bus service.
And he got a raise. And he came into my office. He said, "Damn, I've got to go talk to Johnny. I can't afford this raise because they took out more taxes." I guess he went to he went to a higher tax bracket or something. Said, "Don't give me any more raises, Johnny."
Yeah.
So it's not like these Sirius radio guys now that make the big money.
I would have worked there I had so much fun. I would have worked there for free.
All right. Now, you didn't have, like you say, you didn't have tapes. It wasn't even a thing as an 8-track tape when you started, right? 8-track tapes didn't come along
Well, we
later.
had cards.
You had cards, but
yeah.
but your records were all records.
They were vinyl, and you queued them up.
And you had to cue them all.
We had 4 turntables. Usually one worked.
We know that. We understand that.
Now we had carts.
So now who decided what records you'd play every day? Was it totally you, or did Johnny have you a list?
Johnny had it all programmed out. You could not choose your own record or you'd be in trouble.
Oh.
We were in trouble a little every now and then, but Johnny,
It was tightly formatted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Actually, probably more tightly formatted than a lot of stations back then.
Yeah.
Because years later, I went to work at WIVK in Knoxville, which was a big country station, still is. And when I was there in the mid-'70s, it was pretty much play what you want.
Wow.
Which we did.
Yeah.
And got 25 and 30 shares. But there was no format. We had some hit record sectioned off like we did at JetFly, current stuff. But we had a whole wall of albums. We could play album cuts all night if we wanted to. All day and all night.
So, Johnny, what did you play? Was it Billboard what you based it on, or what you liked? Or was it payola and you got money for it?
No, well, there was a lot of payola going on, but it wasn't at JetFly. If it was, I didn't get any of it. But It was based mostly off of what you looked at as far as Billboard was concerned, new releases, and the format when I got there was pre-set up. It was just modified as we went along a little bit, but we had a gold record and a Hall of Fame that was all on big reels at that time. And when I joined the station, there was 3 sections of records. There was an A section, a B section, a C section, and then you went to an old gold record or Hall of Fame
Every
record.
fourth record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the A section was generally only 5 or 6 records in that section, and they were upbeat songs. I mean, this was set up really. You'll understand the format a little bit here, I guess. They were fast records. The B section had about double that many records in it, and the tempo was a little less. The C section would have probably 3 or 4 more records than the B section, and it was slower records, ballads. And then you went to a Hall of Fame or a gold record. You alternated those at the end of that section. We later expanded that and went to E, F, and G sections. So we added records in that. Particularly in the B section, some of them would fall down in the F section. But what was happening is this records that were in those particular sections, if they were in the A section, we wouldn't take them off. They would just fall down into the E section, okay? And they wouldn't get played as often. If they were in the X section, you were going to hear that record at least every other hour. That's the way it was set up. So because they were hot records.
So basically, who come up with that format? Was that you, or was that Mr. Benz, or?
That was a format that was introduced to me when I got there. So that format was in place. So Mr. Benz.
Did they have it at Birmingham or Montgomery or
Yes,
or Jacksonville?
All 3.
These were sister stations.
Yes,
sister stations.
Did
All
they have
3.
that same format?
Same format.
Okay.
Same format at all stations.
Yeah.
The program director, the guy that hired me, was a guy by the name of Bill Macy. He was the program director at the time I went to work. Well, he wasn't there when I got there, but I was hired by him, and then he was gone when I got there. I had to give a notice, and then by the time I got there, he was gone. But I don't know if he set this up or if it was the Mr. Benz or whoever. It didn't matter. It was working. And the idea was we put more emphasis on the music than on the DJs. But the DJs, I guess that really helped the DJs become popular because most of them didn't get to say their name except when I was there. When I first went on the air, you could say your name twice an hour. That's it. Yeah,
That changed.
that changed. Particularly when E. Alvin Davis
That's
came
what I was
on
going to
board.
say. Later, 15 years later, we had a guy on the air that said his name twice every record.
Yeah.
Remember?
I remember well.
I remember very well that as the record started, you guys talked
Yeah.
over the first part of the record.
Well, we weren't
Was-
supposed to talk over the vocal. You could do
Yes,
it.
right. Not
you
over the
could-
vocal, but
to
in the
lead-in.
intros.
Yeah. In fact, that was kind of a technique where you could. Now it's easier on the computer because you can watch the
got the
timing
timing,
and you see
yeah.
it's 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and you know when to stop talking. And before
You
before
just
that,
had to-
you had to wing it.
It was,
You had to memorize it and have instinct
Yeah.
about when the vocal was
That's
about
when
to
we
start.
really. That's when we had to work as a DJ. Now
Yeah.
you're not driving the train anymore.
I'm curious, did the jocks get to start saying their names more often after they asked for the first raise? was that alternate compensation?
Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Benz would just say, I can't give you any more money, but you can
can
say
say
your
3
name
times.
more often.
Good trade out for Mr. Benz. Mr. Benz was probably he was more of an engineer, wasn't he, than a
Yes, sir.
than a radio. I
Yes,
mean,
sir.
the on air guy. He was very, very sharp on the engineering part of it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the top. He was written
Right.
up. He was written up as a young man in Who's Who in engineering. That's how good he was.
When I was on the air the very first Sunday that I was on, and I'm following this format of, record A and then record B, C, and somewhere in the middle of that shift, Mr. Benz telephones the radio station and talks to the engineer at the time, Ed Gale, and said, "Who is this new guy?" And Ed says, "Well, it's a new guy we've got named Ringo Van." He said, "Well, he's choosing his own records. I don't like the music he's playing." I didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, if he didn't like a record, I don't care who put the record in the system. And in the early years, these guys may not even realize it, but in the early years that I was there, his wife chose the music.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
They lived in Washington, D.C.
I didn't know that.
And his wife chose most of the music. Now, when I say most, I'm saying 90% of the music was chosen by her. In Washington, I'd get a list down every week, along with, she literally sent me the records. These are the records you play, and this is the section you put them in. They was already pre-labeled and everything.
Mr. Ben's wife.
Right. And these are the records you take out of the system. You don't play anymore, and they're replaced by these records. But anyway, so she did that by long distance. And that was the way the format was set up. I knew I just did the work because there wasn't anything there that you had to do.
So she was listening to Washington, D.C. stations,
Right.
I guess. And
Right. That's what got us ahead. We would play records
yeah.
long before any of the radio
From
stations.
bigger markets.
Right.
And then later, Robert, the son of Mr. Benz, went to Georgia Tech to college. He was the same age as we were. And he was listening to Quixie, which
Right.
was a WQXI in Atlanta, terrific radio station. So he would sit in his dorm room and write down the songs that they were playing and get on the phone and call Johnny and say, "Here's what you need to be doing." So we were ahead of the competition there too.
Right.
We were playing the same music as
I remember, if a lot of us, if we heard a record, heard a song, it was from WFLI, and you sold a lot of albums. A lot of singles and albums that we used to buy, just tons of. Who was the craziest guy you ever worked with down there? The statute of limitation is over.
Well,
I
it
mean-
depends on how you use the word crazy.
Well, I don't mean,
Bible
certain.
laws are still in effect.
Not Looney Tune Ben, but the guy's just the wild guy or crazy guy.
On the air?
Oh yeah, well, anytime. I mean, this is your chance to pay them back.
Well, I'm not sure. I could pick out one that was the craziest. We used to have a guy that worked nights. He's passed on now. His name was Johnny Midnight. And a lot of people knew him, but he came up with the phrase of our weather, when we do the weather at night or any time. I guess he was kind of crazy. Because he had the women crazy. Let me put it that
Yeah.
way.
He was crazy about women.
Yeah, they were crazy about him too.
And so what's new?
But anyway, he come up with the phrase, now a word from Peter Jeter, the cross-eyed meter reader. And that was his intro into the weather.
Well, you drink a beer and you try to say that.
Yeah.
Tommy Jett was
Hey now.
probably the most popular DJ.
Yeah.
He was always on the air too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He served a lot of time on the air.
Yeah. He was great. He had a great following.
Yeah, he did.
He had a great radio name.
Yeah.
What about that? Well, what about that David Carroll guy?
What about him?
Wasn't he on the crazy list there?
No, I wouldn't put him on the David's more on the calm list.
Yes, he was.
David's one of the all-time greats. I'll tell you that.
David used to come around when I was on the air. When I first started there, excuse me. and he was from North Alabama. What was that town? He was from? Scottsboro.
Flat
Hyder. He came up all the time and just to hang around in the lobby. And we had this big picture
Actually,
window.
I think it's Bryant.
You're right.
A picture window like that. You could sit in the lobby, look in at the DJ, and he would come in. And I used to let him come in and sit and talk for a while, a few times, and then he just talked nonstop to me, distracted me. And I finally sent him back out to the lobby for future visits. But I was talking to him when I moved back to the area and became reacquainted with him. I said, David, I was 18, 19, 20, 21 when you were hanging around there, and I may have been insulting to you sometimes. I liked having you around, but you were kind of a pest. And if I was, I apologize. He said, well, I don't remember that. I was just grateful for you to be there. I said, how old were you, about 16? He said, no, I was 13.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was heavy into it back then. That's all he wanted to do was be a DJ.
Wow, yes.
I worked with a guy, though, who worked at WFLI, but I knew him a long time before Fly. And I worked with him in Charlotte and in Tampa Bay.
Right.
His name was Boo Barron. Do you remember Boo Barron?
Yeah.
Boo was, if he ever heard this show and I didn't call him the craziest person I'd ever worked with, he would be insulted. We were working together at one of Ted Turner's stations once, and we had a big bash for the advertisers, and Ted was in town, and he had his wife with him, and he and the general manager and their wives came in after this bash, and there had been a lot of alcohol involved, and I think the general manager had given Boo some money to buy some decent clothes with or something, and Boo spent it on a case of whiskey. And when Turner and after this bash that night, and Boo worked 7 to midnight, Ted Turner and the general manager, who was Doug Kimball, I knew Doug in a couple of cities too, and their wives came back to the station, and Boo was behind the control board in his underwear. He had one gal who was half undressed on the table, on the console, dancing, and another one behind him dancing. And, of course, the general manager just died. He was ready to fire him right then. And Ted Turner just laughed. He said, this is great. This guy knows how to have fun. And he was never fired. But I have a lot of Boo Barron stories over the years.
Did Gene Lovin work there?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Gene Lovin.
Yeah.
Lovin is the right time for loving.
Yep.
He's still on
Night
the
times.
Gene is still on the air. He's,
Oh, is he? Where's he at now?
106.9. One of the.
I mean, he works for DOD a little bit later on.
Yeah.
When we were arranging this little reunion here, that name came to my mind. And so somebody popped up on Facebook and asked me to be my friend. And I thought it was Gene Levin. And I said, sure. And he was looking for Levin. It was not Gene. And I'm yelling this morning, Ron, come here and help me block this guy.
Yeah.
Gene's still active. I ran into him at McKay's in Chattanooga about a month ago.
Yeah.
And then he came to a little get-together we had. Well, he wasn't there at the station that day, the last day of the broadcast.
Yeah.
But I had, he and
came.
Earl Friedenberg and Ben Cagle had breakfast.
Comes to the Christmas.
And I ran into him downtown.
Well, you guys get ready here in just a second. I want you to give your best on-air memory of you introducing a record on WFLI. I want you to do that spiel. I want you to have that energy you had. Hey, folks, you're listening to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. We're going to open the phones up here now, and you can give us a call here at 614-5553. What if they don't live in this area, Morgan?
All right, well, they can add 423 to the beginning of 614-5553.
All right, we got Bill Miller, Ringo Van, and Johnny Eagle here, and they're talking about WFLI, 50,000 watts, jet fly radio. And they used to have that echo where the beat goes. What did Tommy Jet say?
Well, it wasn't him that said it, but it was, and now on we go with the musical show on down, beat, 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 beat.
You had the good echo to done that, you know.
Then you
Yeah,
roll
so
back.
you can give us a call here and say, all right now, Bill, give us your best introduce a song from the old jet flight? Can you remember any of those
Kind of
songs?
hard to do without a song.
It is kind of hard to do.
But, you know,
Plus, my voice is not in shape. Who did that down beat, Johnny? Was that Bill Macy?
A guy by the name of Bill Macy.
That wasn't the first
Right.
Speedy.
Yeah, he was the first program director.
When I was driving in, I was listening to Whoop, and I heard Tommy
I'm
do
sorry.
it.
Yeah,
I heard Tommy do it.
Yes, yeah, we had some clips there. He had a show that we done he does a podcast or something now, and we do on Friday nights. We had done some of it before here.
I heard that a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
I was driving through Ocoee or someplace.
Yeah. Not many people. Not many
Who's that
people.
voice? That sounds,
We appreciate you
What's
listening to
Tommy
Luke.
Jack?
That's 8 of us now that listen to Luke. Go ahead and give it to us, Bill.
I don't know if I can. Really don't know if I can.
Hard to do.
Yeah.
Bill has a great voice, as you can tell.
Oh, yeah.
Just a great radio voice.
Here's the number one song this week on the Flying 20 survey. Tommy James and the Shondells. Crimson and Clover. Over and over
And over.
and
yeah.
over and over.
All right.
Every hour, 45 minutes.
All right, Ringo. Light it up here.
Hi, everybody. This is Ringo Van, the Music Man on Jetfly Radio. I'll be at the Coat of Arms tonight from 9 to 5. I'll be looking for you. You be looking for me because we've been wrong too long. We're going to get right tonight.
That sounds an awful lot. Did Tommy get that from you?
Yeah. Is that where you fell off the stool? All right, Johnny.
I don't call this necessarily a record intro, but this kind of got me in trouble with Mr. Benz.
Okay.
Because I didn't know he was in town, and I didn't know he was listening. But we had a sponsor. It was called American National Bank, and we were coming right out of that spot, and I had a record queued up to play. And so when the spot ended, I simply said, I used to date a girl at the bank until I found out she was a teller. And then
Pretty good.
and then the record was Jerry Lee Lewis, and it started off Great Balls of Fire.
Oh, Lord.
So it's kind of hard to create that when you don't have the record.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Now, the
Of course, I didn't say that anymore.
like I say, we can say anything here. Nobody's listening, so that's all right, you know. Well, make a mistake. That's when they're listening. Always, you know.
Oh, yeah.
The Jet Fly Spectaculars, just legendary. What was your favorite one you ever worked for, Bill? Now, how much involvement did you have when you had those spectaculars?
I had very little. Johnny pretty much put them together by himself and executed the decision making and
Well, you did a
the
good
whole
job.
thing. Johnny Eagle is the Jet Fly Spectacular guy.
Well, did you ever have to go do any of them, or which one do you remember the most?
We usually intro. Well, first of all, I guess I was 11 years old when Jet Fly went on the air. So by the time I became a teenager, I was going to the Spectaculars, just as a high schooler and a fan. So I went to some great shows. But after I went to Fly, we usually rotated the introductions. All the full-time guys usually got to introduce somebody. And I remember one night we had a group called Pacific Gas and Electric. They had their big hit was called "Are You Ready?" Yeah, it's kind of a spiritual song.
I remember the song. I do not remember the name.
Great song.
Wow.
But Pacific Gas and Electric, when they had a hit with that song, had been sued by the energy company out in California, Pacific Gas and Electric, and they stole their name because they were from the West Coast. So I was supposed to introduce them as PG&E. Somebody, probably Johnny, said you got to call them PG&E because there's a lawsuit, and there may be somebody here monitoring to see if they're using that name.
This is at Memorial Auditorium.
This is Memorial Auditorium. So I got to introduce PG&E that night, and I went out and did welcome in, and their big hit, "Are You Ready?" Ladies and gentlemen, Pacific Gas and Electric! And they stood over there and stared at me, glared at me.
That cost us $50,000. All right, Ringo, what's your?
I was involved with or at least was part of many, if not most of those spectaculars from 64 to 69. And we just had some terrific stars that came. I remember very well Neil Diamond, and he was just a rising young star that had one hit record. He had this big button that he wore, kind of his caricature of him playing the guitar, and it said, "I like the feel of Neil," and was passing those out. And there are a lot of stories about these guys behind stage. There was Jerry Lee Lewis, Kenny Rogers,
Who was a great guy.
Paul Revere and the Raiders, Leslie Gore.
Well, you'll have to tell your Leslie Gore story.
And Lou Christie, and remember driving Lou Christie back to the airport, and all these starstruck girls would followed us because they wanted to see. They walked us out to the plane, and he got on the air, and I thought, man, I'm in heaven here. I've got all these girls, and everyone I've just turned around and walked away. Yeah.
But tell your Leslie Gore story.
Well, as Bill said, the DJs would introduce the star who would come on and do their set, and then the performer would sing their songs, and then the DJ would come back out and thank them and introduce the next DJ to come out to introduce the next star. Because we'd have, how many, 7 or 8 stars per show?
Yeah.
Big stars. Don't do that anymore, obviously. Couldn't dare afford to do that. So somehow I was chosen to introduce Leslie Gore. I introduced her. She sang her songs. And then as she was finishing, and we were kind of on a time, and Johnny was back there saying, "Let's keep it moving, keep it moving." And I was to go out to introduce the next DJ and thank her. And as she was walking off stage, I said, "Leslie, come back over here. I have a question for you." And Johnny's saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And she came back to the mic, and I said, "I've got a question for you. You've got the #1 record in the country. You're touring all over the country. Yet I read where you're a sophomore at whatever college she was attending up in New England. I think it was maybe Smith College. And I just saw where you're on the dean's list. How?" And I'm just a DJ here at WFLI, local radio station, local college, a college student, and I'm barely making grades to get by. How do you do that? How do you do it? She had no idea what I was going to ask her in front of these thousands of screaming kids. And she looked at me, and she looked out at the audience, and she looked back, and she said, "Well, Ringo, I guess I just know my professors a little better than you do." Yeah, that was a great memory. She was sharp. She was sharp. Bless her heart, she died about a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw Paul Revere and the Raiders there, and then
Yeah.
another one I went was the Cowsills when they were a big group, and
Johnny can tell you.
not many people remember the Cowsills.
I
but-
remember. Johnny can tell you all about them. We had Herman's Hermits, and they were here for a long weekend before. You've got all kinds of stories about Paul
Yeah.
Revere.
Oh, yeah. The Who.
Oh, yeah.
We had
Yeah.
The Who here.
Yeah.
But you're right about the Paul Revere, because they were the most popular group of all.
Right. They had the TV show at the same time? They
No, that was
hosted.
the Monkees.
Well, no, they had another. They hosted a show.
Where the action is something.
Yeah,
They
where
were-
the action-
They were on a
Yeah.
weekly basis.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But they were the most popular group that we brought to town, because every time we had asked, "Who would you like to see?" Because on the air we'd ask that, and if people call in or write in, we'd jot it down, and those would be the groups we'd try to go get. And Paul Revere and the Raiders were always the top of the cotton picking list. So every time we had a chance to bring them back, we did. But I guess the most unusual memory I had of them is that we had them booked for a concert. We were doing 2 shows then. Well, after the first show that we had to start have 2, because the auditorium only held 5,000 people. And they were, so we had them booked for our 5:30 show, and again at our 9 o'clock show. They were booked for those shows. And then I get a call saying the contracts that I had were no good, that they had changed agency, and this agency wasn't authorized to book them. Well, I found out they were.
And we'd already promoted it. So
Yeah, we'd been
sold
promoting it for
tickets.
weeks.
Yeah.
And I found out they were booked in Atlanta on the same day. And they were playing in Atlanta at 3 o'clock and at 8 o'clock. That was their dates down there, or the times down there. So I drive down to Atlanta to meet with Paul to see what we could work out, to try to explain to him. And, of course, he explained to me that a lot of radio stations would promote them and didn't even have a contract. And they try to get them to come into the town that way. And I said, well, this is not the case. And in fact, I took the contract that I had with me and let him see it. And so he said, well, let's see what we can work out. So he got with his road manager, a guy by the name of Hoss. I don't remember that's what he called him. Anyway, he was the equipment manager. And they were not even using their own equipment there in Atlanta because they were demoing some special equipment from another company. They were using that equipment except for their guitars and stuff. So he said, okay, and I told him we'll provide transportation. At that time, one of Mr. Benz's partners owned Lear International in Atlanta. So they rented Lear jets. So we set up the Lear jet to fly them from Atlanta to Chattanooga. So they finished their show. Anyway, he said, I'll send my equipment, I'll send Hoss and the equipment up there. And if you can provide us with air to get up there and back down here for this show, then we'll do it that way. So they were going to play 4 performances that day. So they did their 3 o'clock show down there, which was a 30-minute show. At 3:30, we had them a police escort in Atlanta to get them to the airport. They got on that Lear jet, flew them to Chattanooga. We had a police escort from Chattanooga to get them to the auditorium. They got to the auditorium right at 5:20. And we had the show set up for an entirely different opening act. So the stage was set for them, but they got to the auditorium about 20 minutes after 5. And Paul said, let us go on first. I said, I can't do that. You're the second closing act. I mean, you're going to be the act that's going to be the next to the closing act. And we went to that, then we went to an intermission, and we brought back the closing act. And that was Jan and Dean. Anyway, they said, no, let us go on first. So we broke the stage down and opened the show with Paul Revere and the Raiders. I mean, that was a big deal.
I remember that.
That was a big deal.
Yeah.
Anyway, then they left, hopped the plane, went back to Atlanta. Okay? And here we are approaching. They were then supposed to get back in time to be the act just before we closed for intermission. And
at the 9 o'clock show.
At the 9 o'clock show, which was right at 11, between 10:30 and 10 and 10:30. So we figured they had plenty of time. Well, the intermission started, and they still weren't there. And so I tried to go to Jan and Dean, who were the closing act, and they were the hot numbers then, to get them to go ahead and go on because the audience was about to get restless. And they refused. No, we're the closing act. When that curtain falls on us, there ain't nobody going on behind us.
Sounds like Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they just would not bend at all. Well,
wow.
Almost in the middle of that argument with them, or it wasn't an argument, but that discussion, in walks Paul Revere and the Raiders. So we went out and delayed it 5 more minutes to get them on the air. I mean, to get them on stage. But we had to break the stage down. We'd set it up for Jan and Dean, but we didn't have a choice. We didn't know they were going to make it.
Yeah.
But they made it.
Yeah.
And so we had to break the stage down and set it back up for Paul Revere and the Raiders.
So they did 4 shows that day.
They did 4 shows that day.
That's tough. Yeah.
Well, he said they enjoyed the pleasure of having the Learjet bring them back and forth between Atlanta and Chattanooga, but they'd never do that again.
You know, there's a lot of acts. Jerry Lee Lewis was one of those. I closed the show out. The big argument was between him and that's just Chuck Berry, who we just lost.
Yeah.
And I think that he went on and put on a show and burnt the piano and then told Chuck Berry to follow that. Did you have a lot of that? Who argued who closes the show?
No, generally speaking, when we started booking the acts, they knew where they were going to be in the program.
Mm-hmm.
If you weren't going to be the closing act, You know, you knew that. You'd be somewhere in between the opening act and the closing act. But we did have another incident that involved Kenny Rogers. Kenny Rogers was Kenny Rogers in the first edition at that time. They were probably, outside of Paul Revere and the Raiders, the nicest group of anybody we ever had there. And we had this group of, I think it was called Frigid Pink.
Yeah.
And
I don't remember that one.
And they were probably, they had just had one record. Okay, they weren't popular
at the time.
I don't remember them at all.
They had a cover of House of the Rising Sun or something.
Yeah, I think so.
They had one hit. You're right.
And they were just their popularity was just beginning. So I had them set up to be the opening act. And man, they just thought they were hot stuff, and they were not going to open the show. And so the road manager, well, Kenny Rogers was his own road manager. He heard my discussion with the road manager for the Frigid Pink
Backstage.
And he stepped over and said, "Johnny, we'll open the show. We don't have a problem with it."
And he was much bigger than Frigid.
Oh, yeah.
Much bigger act.
Yeah.
And we don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
And so the road manager for Frigid Pink went back and discussed it with them, and they were going to be the next act, and they did not want to follow Kenny Rogers.
You got to make a decision, right?
So they changed their mind, so we'll open the show.
Yeah. So now, was the price $1 and $2 to get in, or something like that at one time, or
It was $2 for general admission.
Yeah. $2.50 reserved.
Right.
Yeah.
And we just had a small section of
And-
down
You-
front and on the floor.
Can you
was-
imagine? I mean, and you saw
Reserve
6 or 7 or 8 different major stars.
Yeah, major stars.
Today, you pay how many times? 100% times that.
oh yeah,
Just to see
it's
one.
$100 for a big concert.
Yeah.
Now I looked at
Yeah.
Tommy Emmanuel
Yeah.
up in the caverns up in where is it? That it was $100 a ticket. Of course, they'd been sold out day one.
Right.
I'm going. I don't know if I want to see anybody that bad or not. Now we got YouTube and
Right.
you can find anything now, but used to it'd be if you wanted to see a lot of these acts, you had to physically go there to watch
Right.
anything.
One of the advantages that WFLI had as far as booking, I think I'm right here, correct me, is, see, we had sister stations in Birmingham, Montgomery, and in Jacksonville, WVOK, WBAM, WAPE. So we would book these shows with these stars for 4 different locations over a period of a week or so, a week and a half. So we could, it was more attractive. It was more attractive to
Yeah,
them.
not much travel time, not from
Right.
coast to coast.
Not much travel time. They knew they had 4 shows geographically right in a row. So it really worked. It really worked well for us.
So now, when you had the spectaculars, did you still do your ABCD list, or was the groups that were going to be there at the spectacular got more playtime?
Great question.
They actually didn't get a lot more playtime. I mean, they got some, but not a lot, because FCC was real strict then. You didn't want to get into this is a payola type thing.
Oh,
They
okay.
did get some additional playtime.
But when we would play their record, we would plug the show.
Plug the show.
Sure.
You know.
Now, did they all sell out?
Let me put it this way: the shows were not designed purposely by Mr. Benz to make money. They were designed to promote the radio station.
Right.
Of all the shows we had, there was only one show that did not make money. That was the last one in
Really?
1972.
Who was that?
I don't remember who was on the show.
No one else remembered them either.
I've slept since then.
Well, I imagine the cost had started to go up a little bit then
It
too.
did.
Yeah,
It did.
yeah.
And
So-
the popularity of the groups that we booked obviously wasn't there. We
What?
thought it was, but it wasn't.
So we would usually have, someone that had just had one hit record. Then you'd have a headliner who had many hit records and people in between. But I think we always opened up with a local band. Didn't we do that?
We tried to, yeah.
Tried to promote local musicians. So
Who was some of the local bands? You remember any of
I
those?
can't remember the names. There were a
No,
couple.
boy.
There was one from Cleveland. Or
The Orange Blues?
can't remember.
You know, I don't remember either, to be honest with you.
It'd been later.
I know that we had a guy that used to be a disc jockey there. His name was Chris Witter, and he had a record. We brought him back. He opened one of the shows. Stanley Hall, who also had a record, it used to be the production manager of WFLI. His record was called Bobby's Dad, and it wasn't a big record, but it was big for us.
It was big for Stanley.
Yeah, oh, yeah, and he opened the show once.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he
That's
did.
great. That's great.
And you don't remember him and the little Murph that he used to carry as his mascot?
Oh, boy,
A Murph.
Well,
that bothers me.
I call it a Murph because I'm not sure what he called it, but it was a security blanket for Stanley. Yeah, and he walked out on that stage with that thing in his arm. That was his security blanket.
Incredibly talented man.
He was.
He was our production.
Yeah.
He did most of the commercials. The Cleveland commercial. Johnny and I were talking on the drive up this morning. We drove by Boyd Speedway, and we drove by the old Sugar and Spice,
Yeah.
and clothing store downtown, Law's Clothing or whatever. And
Law.
Stanley would do all those commercials.
Stanley wrote a song, The Sugar and Spice. It was a Christmas, little short Christmas commercial. It was a minute long. And we played it every Christmas when the Sugar and Spice advertised.
Yeah.
What was the first time? We wish you a Merry French fry. We miss you a
Something like that.
We wish you a Merry French fry. We miss you a
Yeah.
hamburger.
Yeah, Stanley was talented. He really was.
We had a large audience in Cleveland.
Oh, yes.
We're
Yeah.
Very, very appreciative of this whole region's
Well, you
dedication to
you had a large audience everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine when, of course, we all remember Bob Brandy. When they opened up the mall here, Bob Brandy was here, and he was his own rock star in sense.
Sure he was.
Oh my gosh! And people come in just to sit on Rebel.
Yeah.
You know. I'm scarred because of Bob Brandy. I'll tell you in a minute.
Where did that spotlight come from that you guys used?
That came from That was Mr. Benz's idea, and it came from a friend of his in Hartselle, Alabama. He had two of them.
There you go.
And Mr. Benz, I don't know why he just thought it was a good idea.
It was a great idea.
It
Oh,
was.
it's great.
And so he bought one of them and brought it up. And so
It was an old military spotlight,
that
I
was
think.
an anti-aircraft spotlight.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what it was.
Wasn't like your dad used when they shot it out from underneath him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we would do remotes
Yeah.
and sell advertising and send the DJ over to
Follow the light.
Oh, it works. You know, if you were 16, 17 driving along and that light comes across the clouds,
Yeah.
we had to find it.
Yeah.
Now, we would listen to the music. We didn't pay attention to the commercials.
Yeah.
That's not what we did, but
Right.
we'd start finding and we'd drive by to see where the light was.
Right.
But what messed up the light was daylight savings time. So when that was invoked, then the sun didn't go down till 9 o'clock.
Never thought of that.
Yeah. So it just made it a little more difficult to convince somebody they should have the light.
So these jet flies, the big bands, what did they cost you to come in here in those days?
I think we paid Jan and Dean $3,000. I do remember the time that we had the two shows with Paul Revere and the Raiders. We paid them $3,500 plus transportation, of course. But I think the most we paid anybody was $5,000.
Herman's Hermits may have been really big at the time we had them.
They've been earlier too. They've been a big.
I believe that, we got Herman's Hermits on that particular package because we got Herman's Hermits, we got The Who, and there was another group. trying to think of their names. I can see them because they wore these suits that lit up.
The Monkees?
No, I can't think of the name of it now. But anyway, we got them as a package deal. And there's an interesting story about Herman's Hermits and the Who, because they were touring together in the United States, and they had
That's an odd combination. The Who and Herman's Hermits.
Yeah. And they had leased this plane, and they had played in Atlanta the week before. So they were coming into town early in midweek because our show wasn't until Friday.
Yep.
So their plane caught fire in midair coming from Atlanta to Chattanooga. And so they had to make an emergency landing. And that plane sat there for, I don't know, a month or more till they got it fixed and got it out of here. But they had whoever they leased the prop plane from, they had to get them another plane in here because they flew out. But anyway, they came in. That was interesting, just the fact that they
the Who turned out to be huge later on.
Herman's Hermits, if I remember, came in 3 or 4 days early.
Yeah.
Before their show. And the Who, and we put them up at a downtown motel.
That's what it was called, the downtown.
The downtown.
Downtown motel.
It's like I said, we put them up at downtown. And then we entertained them took them out to the lake skiing and took them around town. It was some great memories. Yeah.
Who was the lead singer for Herman the Hermits? What was his name?
Peter Noon.
Peter Noon.
Peter
Yeah,
Noon.
yeah.
Yeah.
You probably don't know who those are either, do you? No, he did.
Well, he still, he did have, I'm not sure if he still does, had a show on Sirius XM.
Oh, did?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Is he deceased?
I think he's still alive. He was still doing shows. He was also performing.
Okay.
I want to think a year ago, but you know how time is now.
Who did you try to get that you couldn't afford?
Elvis.
Oh, okay. That would have been a big show.
Made an offer, but got turned
How
down.
close did you get?
Well, I think we offered 50,000, and they were asking for 100. Because there was just no way the ticket prices would have just been exorbitant,
And we didn't have the facility.
We didn't have
a facility to sell more than 5,000 tickets.
They booked him. WAPE got him, paid $100,000, and booked him in Jacksonville at the Gator Bowl.
And how much?
Filled it.
And that probably charged more than $2 a ticket back then, wasn't
right.
it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's unbelievable. That a lot of fun. Hey, it's time for our mid-morning break here. We'll be back in a few minutes. We always play a song called Gone Home. It's in honor of all the people in our community that's passed away in this last week. Or your family members anywhere in the world. This song goes out to you. We'll play a few of our sponsors. And we'll be back in a few minutes on Whoop FM, Old Town Cleveland, with the guys from WFLI. I would do that beat, 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 beat.
Yeah,
I don't want to sound like Tommy. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall.
And you're listening to WOOPLP, Cleveland, Tennessee. Whoop FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Checking the cash, you got a brand new choice. Our flexible loans really making noise. Flex your money, my soul. Flex your money, my soul.
A check into cash flex loan puts you in control. Visit your nearest store for details.
Shape a flex loan to fit your needs. Make your next loan a flex loan and set yourself free. Flex your money muscle at checking the cash.
Some restrictions apply. See store for details.
Yeah.
It's me, it's Fro Daddy, saying tune in to the Fro Daddy Show Monday through Friday,
3:30 to 5:30.
Standard Time. Local news, national blues, and a lot of stuff you just can't use. In Cleveland, Tennessee at 99.9 FM and around the world in a daze at WOOPFM.com. I might even play your request, so call me. And if you see WOOP on your caller ID, you better answer the phone, because I won't leave you alone. Fro Daddy.
work here was done. Gone home. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. Life here is lonely since they've gone before. Gone. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. The old weeping willow that stands by the door sadly sighs. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. They've joined the heavenly fold. They're walking the streets of pure gold. They left one by one as the work here was done. Gone home. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone home. They've joined the heavenly fold. They're walking the streets of pure gold. They left one by one as their work here was done. Gone home. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. Where the old town goes. They moved it all north of here in the shopping mall. Where'd the old town go? Did my hometown get old or just me? Did all my friends get old or just me? Are they all gonna have to be told or just me?
Welcome back to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, where you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. Hey, Morgan, tell us what the phone number is here.
All right. Well, you can call us here at 614-5553, or if you're out of the area, just add 423 to the beginning of 614-5553.
He usually does that in Marvin the Martian voice.
No, we want
He's
you
trying to behave
no,
today.
We want your British accent. Introduce these guys from Jet Fly that's on here.
Oh dear. Okay, so we have Bill Miller, Rick. How do you pronounce that? Govan. And Johnny Eagle right here with us today on Whoop FM.
All right.
We enjoy having Morgan with us, and that's okay. And Ron kind of flung that on him.
Yeah,
Ron, we've got a caller here. Who is it?
It's Ed from the car show. Good morning, Ed.
Hey, good morning, guys. How y'all doing?
Hey, the car show today?
No, sir. It is next Saturday.
Next Saturday. I thought it was at the end of the month there.
yeah.
So, yeah. Tell us about what's going to happen.
Okay, as for the past 10 or 12 years, it's the fourth Saturday, starting in April through October. Main Street, we basically close down downtown from Inman Street on Ocoee and Broad all the way up to First Presbyterian Church, and have anywhere from 400 to 700 cars. It's just free, nothing, no charge. Just come, park your car, cruise in, walk around, and look at all the other cars. We do ask for a volunteer donation. Main Street Cruisers is not just a club that gets together, and over the past 10 years, we've donated over $40,000 to local Bradley County charities. So,
all right.
And there's just all sorts of cars, from street rods to original cars, lots of Corvettes and Falcons, and my favorite, Corvairs. And we just have lots of good time. We have a DJ that plays up on the front of the courthouse, and you can park on the back side of the courthouse if you don't want to listen to music. There's lots of good 60s music, and it was just a good time. And when you have 700 cars like we normally do, the first one of the year particularly, it's one of the biggest in the Southeast.
It sure is. And what a wonderful service it is to Bradley and Cleveland. We love having that all activities in downtown, and that draws people from lots of different states too.
And we appreciate.
Yeah, we get people from Murphy and North Carolina and down in Georgia and Alabama. From Knoxville, people come down. The restaurants are open, so it's a good time to come down and enjoy downtown, and we should have just beautiful weather.
The Spot Burger is always a good place to go if you want one of those Spot Burgers.
Right.
And we like to always say thanks to the city of Cleveland for allowing that to go on, and the Cleveland Police Department for their help. They give you blocking off all the downtown streets, and we do appreciate it. Ed, thanks for calling. Miss seeing you.
No problem.
All right, bye-bye. Right now seems like a good time to announce on April the 29th, the Northwest Georgia and Tennessee Racers Reunion will be held at Gordon Brown's in Dalton, Georgia. And this year they're honoring a fellow that starred in our documentary, Charlie Mincy. Charlie was on the documentary talking about running moonshine and then 31 years of racing, and he passed last year. And they're going to be honoring him, and I think that will be a great time for all of our folks in the area that kept up with the racing in this area. So that's on April the 29th.
Right. And next week's show?
Hey, it's a reunion of the Tennessee T-Band.
Boy, I tell you, we couldn't find anybody else for next week, so we had to give it those guys. So
it will be a fun day. We'll talk about the parking lot tours that you guys did. Ron, it looks like we're getting a call here.
All right.
You're live on Old Town Cleveland. Caller.
Good morning.
Good morning there. How you doing?
Hey, Miss Joe. How are you today?
Well, I'd be all right if it wasn't for this pilot. I've enjoyed your show this morning. Other than when the guy said Kenny Rogers, I despise to hear that man. Woo! I cannot stand him. You know what I do?
What did he do to you?
Huh?
What did he do to you?
He didn't do nothing to me, but I just don't like to hear him sing. I just turn around and I turn my radio off. But I want to thank John for finding that song for me last week. Did you listen to it, Debbie?
I did, and it is one of my favorite songs. I have heard it done by other groups, though.
Pardon?
I have heard other people sing it, too.
Oh, really?
Yes, but I was glad Ron found it for you. Was that the one you wanted to hear?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Well, that was...
She requested a gospel song, but she always requests just a swinging so she can dance.
Well, and that was by Stan Beavers, who is in the Rockabilly Hall of Fame, lives here in Cleveland, Tennessee. He's from Copper Hill, Tennessee. So.
Oh, really?
He is. Yes, he is.
Oh, yeah, but he's one of those beavers.
I just wondered where he was from because my son couldn't get him pulled up on the phone.
Oh.
But now, let me tell you, next time that you hear Kenny Rogers, just pop open that bottle of Jack Daniels you got there and finish it off.
And it'll sound better to you, honey.
You're the meanest soul. You know what? I'm coming down there one of these days and I'm going to bring you a quart.
Yeah, and he'll give you a big bear hug. Well, thank you, Miss Joe. You have a great week.
Well, you do the same. And
all right. Happy Easter to you, too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You done made Joe mad talking about Kenny Rogers. Just dropped in to see what condition my condition's in, right?
Well, we know what condition hers in, right?
Oh, she'll get you now. Ringo was talking about what we took the break there is that thanks to David Carroll a lot for keeping all you guys sort of tied together with his books and his things, and it is a big community down in the Chattanooga area with the old DJs. Even though you may have competed against them, we're all saying the same business. So do you stay in contact with all these old guys now?
David hosts a Christmas luncheon annually, and all the old DJs and not just disc jockeys, but folks associated with radio and television, not just in Chattanooga, now also including surrounding cities like Cleveland and Dalton. Folks come and we reminisce, and we used to be competitors. Now we love each other. But David also has that wonderful blog of Chattanooga Radio TV that he has great stories on. He puts on the website. He's got his books. He's great for keeping us together.
Yeah.
I can't remember that last song, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia Dog, or I never get all that right, everything. But
And there's another guy named Ben Cagle that helps to do that too with his.
I think my favorite story with David, when he talks about getting into radio, he would put a record on and then he would run down the street, I believe, to go to the store to get him a snack and run back. He knew exactly how long that song was, and he could get by with that.
well, there was also those records that you played on when you're there by yourself. That if nature called, you needed one of the longer songs, right?
Oh, I used to mow the grass during Hey Jude.
I was going to say Hey Jude or Suspicious Minds.
Oh, yeah.
For the period, that was a long
Well, you talk about the Spectaculars ended about 72. Did the popular music change about that time, and it got to be these bigger bands, and the music changed to a little harder rock that guys didn't play, right?
It was beginning to change during that time, yes.
And FM was kicking in.
Right.
And with FM came album sales, because a lot of the most popular FM stations in the early years of FM radio, I mean the early 70s when I say that, they were album-oriented rock stations, and they'd take an album, play 4 or 5 cuts. When a new album came out, we didn't have that luxury at a top 40 station. We played the hits. We played a wide variety of hits, not just rock and roll hits.
Did you remember one song you just dreaded you had to play? Either you just didn't like?
I remember a Christmas song that I throw up today every time I hear it, and that's, what is it, Mama and something about Santa. Don't get run over by Santa Claus or something.
By a rain.
Yeah.
What was about the Red Barons in the Christmas? Who was that?
Snoopy and the Red Barons.
Yeah, Snoopy and the Red
The
Barons.
Royal Guardsmen.
Royal Guardsmen, that's right. Oh, I remember one of the earliest songs was Red Rubber Ball.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know who done that. Who played that?
The Circle.
Yeah.
But actually, it was a song I think that was written by Paul Simon.
Oh, really?
But Simon and Garfunkel never did it, just the Circle did it.
But, you know, David Carroll has on one of his blogs a year or two ago, had a great comment, a great article about a conversation he was having with his wife, Cindy, who also had been a DJ. That's where they met. Yeah. And they were talking, and this was a recent conversation, and she asked him about a song, and he said, I don't remember the words to that. And she said, well, how do you not remember the words to that? You played it 1,000,000 times when you were on the air. And he explained, which is true, when we'd introduce a song, and we'd turn down the monitor, and we'd go get ready for the next commercial. We'd talk to somebody who walked in the studio. We'd answer the phone. We weren't really listening to the, so there were oftentimes we didn't have a clue what that song was like.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're busy in between songs.
We were
if you have to spin the record, so you got to cue the next one.
Yeah.
And, of course, you had to follow the ABC rule.
Answer the phone call. Answer the phones. And the phones lit up constantly.
So,
especially when you were on the air, Bill Miller.
Especially when I was on the air.
Well, is that for a request, or were they mad at you?
Depending on what day it was.
It was all those women that didn't chase you, Ringo.
Well, that's true, too. But Bill Miller was a great DJ and was real popular, and everybody in town was listening.
Yeah, he was good.
All righty,
well, he probably still is, but he's just...
But that's why Tommy Jett was 10 years older than me, but when I got to town, he was the guy I latched on to. And I went out with Tommy a lot, because anywhere Tommy went, there were 4 or 5 girls following it. And so I knew that I was going to at least get the second prettiest one.
Anyway, Golly, you were live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Mrs. Marilyn.
Hey, Marilyn, how you doing?
Oh, we're getting ready to go into Hardee's and have a biscuit here. I guess this will be brunch since we're running late. I remember listening to Jet Fly. I was in the 8th grade riding the school bus in Cohutta. And we thought we had a cool bus driver. We thought he was old. He was probably 20-something. And he would play Jet Fly for us. And the only song I can ever remember is Blue Moon. And we heard it every morning and every afternoon with Blue Moon.
The Marcells?
Yeah. Marcells.
Tried to sell some bread.
Yeah.
A lot of people covered that song, but
Yeah.
Marcel's had it on the top 40.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my husband, he delivered bunny bread door to door, different places, and Jeff Lyle was on his route, and they had up no soliciting signs, I think, but he would go in and sell snack cakes to the guy. We're playing the...
Well, snack cakes is different from soliciting.
Yeah. That's just keeping them from starving. So we've enjoyed the program, and we're looking forward to next week. I'm going to see if I can't get all the other two people in the fan club to come and stand out in the mall with signs.
I'd like to say it's we couldn't find anybody else to do the show next week, so we got Tennessee T, the legendary band from Cleveland, to do their reunion show here.
There you go.
And
All right.
our 7 big hits.
Mark Dixon tells me Tennessee T was a great band.
Well, we thought we were.
Legends in their own minds. Thanks, Marilyn. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
The top 40, was it? This is always a tough question, but I ask anyway. Was it tend to be a little bit more white music than it was blacks, or was it a good mix?
We had a lot of Motown.
Motown, was
man.
Motown making the top 40 of there?
Motown was strong
Yeah.
in the mid to late 60s. Motown.
Yeah,
I mean,
I guess Marvin Gaye
Marvin
and
Gaye, the Supremes,
Temptations.
Impressions.
Then you had Stevie Wonder. You had a lot of big acts come through Motown.
It really was a great era, a good era for WFLI, because it's kind of a confluence of the British invasion, Motown,
And Stax. Motown and Stax had their best years in the 60s and early 70s when Jet Fly was a top 40 station.
And you still had some vocalists that had been popular in the 50s that every now and then would come out with a rock song that peaked, like Sinatra, Peggy Lee, Dean Martin, all had hits in the top 10 during.
Boots Made for Walking, Nancy Sinatra.
There you go.
Yeah.
And Atlantic Records, which was had a lot of R&B artists on it. They were in their prime during that period of time too. I jotted down. First week I was at Jet Fly, the first show I did was that we had a chart called the Flying 20 that was placed. It was a printed chart, and it was placed into places like Jack's Music,
Right. Yes.
on in downtown Chattanooga, and I'm sure they were distributed somewhere here in Cleveland. And each week they would print the brand new Flying 20 survey, top 20 songs of the week, and then it's Sunday afternoon at noon or 1 o'clock, noon I think, right? We counted down the Flying 20 survey. That was my first job, was doing weekends and count down the top 20. And I remembered all along that I've always remembered that Crimson and Clover was number one. That very first week I was on Jet Fly. And before we came in here, I checked up some other songs that were on the charts that week. Hey Jude was one. Marvin Gaye, I heard it through the grapevine. Stevie Wonder, For Once in My Life. Johnny Taylor, I think this was probably number one for a while. Who's Making Love to Your Old Lady While You're Out Making Love. Great R&B song. Steppenwolf, Magic Carpet Ride.
Right.
Dion, Abraham Martin and John.
Yep.
Glenn Campbell, Wichita Lineman. And Tammy Wynette, Stand By Your Man. And I'm pretty sure we played them all at Jet Fly.
Oh, that's surprised they made it over that sort of a country hit, though, wasn't it? Stand By Your Man.
Yeah. We played some. We played
some?
Some country,
Yeah, our format, because of our reach was out to the rural area. We weren't just playing to Chattanooga.
Right.
So,
they were
Cohutta, Georgia, like your listeners.
Easy Lovin', Freddie. Yeah, I'm sorry, Johnny.
A lot of country songs were mixed in.
Absolutely.
Easy Lovin', Freddie Hart. And before I got there, I remember the song that played over and over and over was Ferlin Husky, Gone, Since You've Gone.
Yeah.
Which was
I'll
great.
tell you,
That was a great country song.
another show that featured a country artist called David Houston.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Almost Persuaded was his big record.
Big hit.
And that was a massive hit.
When we booked him for our show, he played most of his entire set with his back to the audience.
Really?
Yeah, he did. But the reason he had never played an audience with 5,000 people in it, and the audience was packed. He was scared to death.
Wow.
He was. Wow. But he did. I mean, he did it. They loved him, but
when I played shows, I always looked at the audience and see where the bullets and knives were coming from the beer bottles. So you had to know where those were coming from.
I remember the first song I played when I went on the air in the August or September of '64, and I didn't look it up. I remember it. Do you remember your first song?
I just remember that Crimson Clover was #1 that week. I don't remember the first song.
I remember it was Bobby V, Mr. Lonely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It was Vietnam era, so that was a big
those early days. If you're there with the British invasion, had to be a big change in the music because the Beatles really changed music to what we had before, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. We had a back in the mid '60s. We had top 5 at 5, top 8 at 8, and we'd start taking requests or voting an hour out, maybe an hour and a half out, and one day on Tommy Jett's program on the top 5 at 5, based on the local votes that the secretaries would take the votes, the top 5 records were every one of them were Beatles.
British. That was the British invasion.
Yeah.
But we also subscribed to a service that was produced in Britain, and they would send us tapes of the hot stuff that was going on in Britain. So we got a lot of records before they were ever released in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, I remember our competition would tape them so they could have them.
And we would dub over WFLI over some of the songs.
Right, in the background, you would hear Jet Fly. So if they played it, once we discovered what they were doing, then Jet Fly was going to be there.
So there were British groups like that had yet to peak over here that were popular across the pond that we were introducing, like Jerry and the Pacemakers,
right,
and Peter and Gordon,
right,
a very young teenage Petula Clark, long before they were popular.
One of Herman's Hermits hits. I can't remember which one, had just been released in England, hadn't been released over here. We were still playing his most popular record over here. We got it on tape before it was ever released here. In fact, there wound up being a lawsuit of some sort, not against us, but against the record label, because that was what was happening, is that those programs were produced and taped over there, and they were sent here to us. So they stopped them from doing, the label stopped them because some of those records had not been released here, and it was screwing up the release.
What about Eric Burton and the Animals? When did they come to America? Was it late 60s?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess House of the Rising Sun was his first big hit.
Late 60s.
Tell them about your job at the record shop, Ron.
When I was 12, I had a job at Billy Joe Moore's record shop, a distant cousin of mine, or my dad's, I should say, or I guess mine too. He had wrote a little song for Eddie Arnold called "What You Doing in My World."
Whoa!
So,
whoa!
I used to get to talk to Eddie Arnold all the time when I was 12 years old. I
really
didn't know who the heck Eddie Arnold was, but you know, but I'd seen his royalty checks come in. But I got to work for Billy Joe, which was a country guy.
Yeah.
Had no idea what a rock and roll song was, so I was the expert in the record store of rock and roll. And of course, I got my knowledge from WFLI. So I would listen to it. And of course, the Beatles White Album, I'd seen it come out and go, and people come in there, and I sold a lot of the White Albums. So
where was that store located?
Inman Street, across from Johnston Park, in a little hole in the wall place over there, and right next to Speck Hospital, where Speck Hospital used to be here in downtown Cleveland.
Yeah.
So, and then, of course, I later on went to Jerry's record shop, which was right down here on Inman Street, right across next to where Central Park is now. Mm-hmm. You got to have a reference to food. That's how I know where things are. And he was sort of the person that turned me on to all kind of different albums, and my 8-track collection was very unique. You know, so do you still have your 8-track collection?
No.
Well, I have mine. I don't know what I'd ever do with it because I don't have a player. Or anything.
Our son will be 26 in a few weeks, but he came home from junior high one day. He had signed up for the history of rock and roll class. And he said, "Oh, Dad, heard something you've never heard before. Jimi Hendrix."
Yeah.
And the next day was the Eagles.
And Jimi Hendrix opened, one of his first concerts, he opened for the Monkees, and they booed him off stage. Can you believe that? Jimi Hendrix got booed off stage because they had come to hear the Monkees. There'd be two different types of music there, I would think. So.
I read in the Chattanooga paper this morning that Dolly Parton was voted least likely to succeed by her graduating class at Sevierville High School.
You know, one of our former football coaches here dated her. Graduated high school with her in Sevier County.
Really?
Chief Robinson, Bill Robinson.
Yeah.
He was former head coach here at Bradley, then later on in city councilman. But
well, she's a wonderful person, and there's a class now that they're offering in, I guess, at UT.
I think it is UT.
Yeah, on her life and influence in music and her background.
Jimi Hendrix used to play in the backup band for the Isley Brothers.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
For about a year.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I love that. There's a commercial on a couple of years ago. I can't remember if it was Pepsi or Coke, but anyway, there was a young Jimi Hendrix walking down the street, and one pawn shop had a guitar, and the other one had an accordion. And I think he went in, whichever commercial was, one had a Coke side, one had a Pepsi. He went into the one and had the guitar. So
there you go.
I thought that was great. Demographics is always an important thing when you're in the media business. You know, who are you selling to? What demographics and who was your advertisers trying to get to? I mean, you know, they spent money on you, and probably you were the most expensive ads in the market in radio, wouldn't you think? Because you had such the audience.
Well, we didn't think so at the time, but we didn't. I thought they were too cheap, but apparently they weren't. At any rate, 18 to 34 was the target audience that we went for. Of course, we got a lot of teens, and Coke, of course, and Pepsi, and the soft drinks. They were after that teen audience,
right?
So they came along for the teens, and there were a lot of other products that were teen oriented that came after. But 18 to 34 was our target audience. A lot of advertisers like to go for the 24 to 25 pitch forward, but 18 to 34 was our target audience.
So who all would advertise? Who do the guys you remember advertising with?
Oh, Totten Discount Furniture, Wiley Mobile
Pick
Home.
up at Totten Pickin' Furniture, not the building.
5813 Ringo Road.
Right.
Where you buy that Totten Pickin' Furniture.
Did you have J.M. Sandus?
J.M.
I got 40 and 50 cents off on every one of these.
C&D Clothing.
C&D Clothing.
You mentioned. Yeah.
That was another one. Yeah.
Johnny, and a couple of other guys at the station did. Bill Hall, Stanley Hall, our production guy, just did a tremendous job on Wiley Mobile Homes.
Yeah, Wiley.
Oh, yeah.
Stanley and I collaborated on writing those commercials.
Hoss and
TV and radio. These were on TV too.
Yeah.
So now, did you get a lot of national agencies contact you, or did you have to sell it all on the street? Like Ringo said, he went out to and sold some spots himself, or did you get a lot of those big agency ad buys?
Yeah, we had a national rep that sold to national, represented us in that field. Yeah.
So would that be Coke and Pepsi and?
The Coke and Pepsi was bought on a local level, but you get the one that stands out was is a hand lotion called Husker's Hand Lotion, and it was designed for people. Corn Huskers was the name of it. That was designed for people who shucked corn back in the corn shucking days, because it didn't kept your hands from drying out. We got a lot of their business. I don't know why, because the audience just didn't seem to fit, but it did for them. They were happy with it.
As long as they're happy, that's what all you really cared about.
Amoco Gas was another one. Yeah, we got some moon pie. STP was another big.
Oh, that was used to advertise huge, didn't it?
STP, yes.
Yeah.
So some of the national.
I didn't realize Coca-Cola was local, though.
No, it was all bought locally.
Those were national jingles that were produced
Right.
for them, but they were
Yeah.
it was sold
Yeah.
locally. Okay.
Yeah, you called on the local Coke or Pepsi guy.
Because they were that makes sense. They were locally owned franchises.
Right.
Yep.
Well, you know, that era in the 60s is when we started getting, I know here in Cleveland, we started getting the big box store restaurants. You know, the McDonald's started eventually
Right.
moving in here, and
Right.
the Hardee's. So did you have little local restaurants that advertised?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you had Sugar and Spice.
You had some, yeah.
Yeah, but did you start getting later on? Did you start getting the McDonald ads?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that would have been a huge demographics for you.
I remember when I was at JetFly, I remember the commercial they ran, which said you get a hamburger, French fries, and a Coke, and change back for your $1.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. And Crystal did a lot. Yeah.
Yeah,
We got a lot of business from Crystal.
that was a good days of Crystal. So you could get several hamburgers and a change back for $1. And heartburn. Go with it.
Had
I like heartburn. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about Crystal, you know.
No extra charge.
Right. Wow.
It was also in the late 60s, by the time I got to fly, lifestyles had changed, and men were wearing longer hair, and the young Americans, the women were wearing real long hair. It seems like there was I can't think. There was a whole line of hair care products. And I remember the commercials went something like and boy, this sounds silly.
I'm going to ask you to do that again.
I do not remember that, Bill.
It was a huge campaign they ran for a long time, and it may have been a Clairol brand.
You can Google that tonight.
I should never have opened my mouth.
Well, Gillette used to buy a lot of razor ads.
Yeah.
And they like the local disc jockeys to read them. You know. Well,
that's scary, always, isn't it?
Yeah.
Johnny, tell the story about, speaking of local DJs reading and then not maybe doing it quite right, Tommy Jett reading the news and the Presbyterian.
Oh.
This is so funny.
Well, Tommy was notorious for not proofreading what he was about to read. So he'd just go rip something off of the machine and read it. So I'm driving along downtown and listening to the radio station, and Tommy comes on to do we just did headline news, and he was saying a Presbyterian was hit at the corner of Broad and Market, for example. And I called him up.
Hit by a Cadillac. I mean, a Cadillac.
A Presbyterian was walking across the street.
Yeah, I called him up and I said, Tommy, would you read that again to me? And he read it exactly the way he did it on the air. And I said, tell me something. How did you know that man's religion? I said, what are you talking about? I said, you just told me that you just read that guy was a Presbyterian. I want to know how you knew he was a Presbyterian. And he said, did I say that? But I'll tell you an even funnier one on Tommy. There's another rip and read.
Yeah.
President Dwight D. Eisenhower was in office, and he had gone to Walter Reed. Walter Reed. I started to say Walter A. Wood.
He might have gone there too, didn't he?
But anyway, to have an operation, okay? And he was having his prostate being removed. Well, Tommy, Rip and Read Tommy, she knows what's coming. So he said that President Eisenhower was just released from the hospital today after having his prostitute gland removed.
That was Kennedy.
And I said, "You got to be kidding me!" I like to drove off the road when I heard Tommy say that.
Oh, that's why we don't do the news here.
That's when we went to hiring news guys. Had Mike King.
Yeah, that was when Mike King came on board.
Yeah.
I was just checking the internet. I love cell phones, trying to figure out what that shampoo
What'd
was.
you find
And
out?
I didn't find it, but I did remember it was Clear All Herbal Essence.
Yeah, that's right. You're
and their
right.
commercials had a little vocal boo-ba-doo.
Yeah. Like
And they
bubbles
bought a
in
lot
the
of
back.
yeah, like bubbles.
Right.
And they had a big campaign there for a long time.
Were any of you guys on the air when something memorable, something really big happened in the U.S. that you guys started doing news from there?
I was on the air the night that I think it's a funny story. You guys might not. Your audience, I'm sure, won't. I was on the air when Martin Luther King was shot, and the bulletin machine in the newsroom right behind where we would sit at the board with the turntables was just going crazy. Because it was a developing story. He didn't die immediately, News from. So I'm reading the bulletins, and they're just coming across, and I'm reading them almost in between every song. Developing story out of Memphis. Dr. King's been shot. Looking for the assassin, and Mr. Benz walks in, and he said, "Ringo, why are you reading the bulletin so much?" And I said, "Well, it's a big story, Mr. Benz. I didn't know if you'd been listening to the radio or not." Yeah, I said, "Martin Luther King's been shot." And he said, "Why don't you just stop reading it? We don't want to incite a riot, a race riot in Chattanooga. So why don't you just lay off of it?" So I thought, well, Mr. Benz is a pretty smart guy. He's the boss. So I stopped.
Two things together there, made it.
Yeah, and didn't even, when the news came on, didn't even read the story on the news because he said stop it. About 30 minutes later, the hotline rang. We had this phone where Johnny would have the number, Mr. Benz would have the number. Red line. Johnny said, "Ringo, what's going on?" I said, "Oh, nothing, just a regular night." And he said, "There's a situation in Memphis." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, why aren't you? I've been listening for 30 minutes and I haven't heard you say anything about it. All the other stations in town are all over it." And I thought, this is my chance to have Johnny Eagle think that I'm a really smart guy. And I said, "Well, Johnny, I was just thinking that if we did that too much, it might incite a race riot in downtown Chattanooga. So I decided not to do that." And he said, "Ringo, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Start reading those bulletins."
But I'll tell you this: Tommy Jett was on the air when President Kennedy was assassinated, and he basically panicked. He didn't know what to do, and he was having a hard time dealing with it. Ed Gale, who was the engineer at the time, and also did nights at WFLI, was there and stepped in. And I got to tell you, he probably read for, and I wasn't there. I was in Michigan. He probably read for almost 4 hours of them ripping and reading stuff straight. I mean, we stopped all commercials. Mr. Benz had all commercials stopped, all music stopped, everything was focused on that. But Tommy did the first part of it, but it just kind of shook him up. He didn't know how to handle it. But Ed did a marvelous job at reading and keeping his composure with all those stories that were coming out of Dallas at the time. It was something else. I was in Flint, Michigan, on my way back home when I heard that.
And I didn't I didn't realize it until a few years ago. But the Kennedy assassination may have had a big influence on the popularity of the Beatles. The Beatles came along like 60 days later in America.
Right. That's true.
And we were in such a depressed state of mind and stunned.
Yep.
But they kind of focused all of our negativity on something positive, and something that was fun, and we had a chance to forget all the bad stuff, at least in small spurts.
Yeah.
Well, it made the
That's a good
it made the kids forget about it, and the adults mad at the Beatles.
That's right.
Yeah, because
Turn their attention away, too.
That long hair and that.
Yeah.
Listen to them.
And you look at the pictures now, that hair really wasn't that
Oh
long.
no. You know, you talked about long hair, and I like the men's hair's got long, and the girls' skirts cut shorter. Mm-hmm. And that's those go-go skirts in those days.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite days of my life.
Me too.
Me too.
Yeah.
That was a promotion that we had too at FLI. We had a mini skirt march downtown.
I'm sorry I missed that.
And we had a mini skirt contest for the shortest mini skirt.
That was after I left, unfortunately.
We need a time machine, don't we? I can go back to that. So, name some of the guys that you worked with. You know, we just named a handful of the guys. Who's some of the other guys that were on WFLI that?
Mike Murray was a great DJ. He was just absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Nick Smith, this is back in my era. Mm-hmm. Nick Smith, Mike King, Tommy, of course, Dale Anthony. Johnny's running the shop. Johnny, by the way, was just a tremendous station manager. Many of us have said that to his face many times. He kept us all somehow corralled. I don't know how you did it, but you did it.
I don't know either.
And it worked.
But it was fun.
And then at night we had Barry J. or Stan T. That was kind of my era. Then, Bill, you came a year right as I was leaving.
Yeah, Ringo was there a few months after I came, so I worked with all these guys. And then Jimmy Bird.
Jimmy Bird. Oh, God.
That's Jimmy Bird. He came along. And Rick Shaw came back. Rick is from Cleveland, of course. Rick Sharp.
Rick Sharp.
And who else was through there? Michael Henry Martin, Mark Boring.
David Carroll.
From Madisonville. David came right after I was there. Of course, he used to hang out all the time when I was working there. And
Chickamauga Charlie worked there for a while.
Chickamauga Charlie came through. And we had a black guy came up from Birmingham whose family owned a station in Birmingham, and I often wonder whatever became of him.
Actually, what Birmingham was Huntsville.
Was it Huntsville? That's why I have always had trouble finding him.
Yeah.
And I don't know what his real name was, but he did nights. And part of the reason was that WNOO, the black station, signed off at night. So we had this huge audience we could tap into. And his air name, and I believe his real name was Tyrone Ferguson. So his air name was Tyrone Get Down Ferguson. Mm-hmm. And he was a great guy.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, he was a great guy.
Didn't we have somebody named Quincy?
Yeah, at one time.
That was after me, yeah. Quincy McCoy.
And then,
Quincy something.
Yeah,
sorry.
Quincy McCoy, I think was his
okay.
name. I think that's what it was. then there was Sam Irwin.
Yeah.
He was probably the first black DJ there. Mm-hmm. He was known as Smoking Sam.
What was he smoking?
Well, at the time it was cigarettes, but I think it progressed.
Went to pop tobacco.
And Gene
later.
Lovin.
Gene Lovin. Oh, yeah.
Ben Cagle came as an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
He was there.
He was on the air
for a while, yeah. I can't think of anybody else, but there were some. When I got there, Bill Macy basically hired me.
Ron Arnold.
Ron Arnold.
Ron Arnold. Well, I had heard of Ron Arnold's name in a while.
Ron Daly. Yeah.
Down Dalton?
Yeah.
Ron passed away a couple of years.
Yes.
Bill Macy. Then a guy by the name of Dan Prescott. He was the program director when Bill Macy was gone. He was placed as Dan Prescott was mid guy, and he became the program director when I came on board. And then he didn't last very long. And then the next step was, I say he didn't last very long. It was probably 4 or 5 months after I came on board. And then Mr. Benz called me up and called me in the office and wanted me to become program director. And I said, you got to be kidding. I mean, I had no earthly idea of what to do. And I told him, I said, I don't think I'm a good choice. I loved and was flattered that he thought I was, but I just didn't have any kind of experience in that department. He just said, you'll do fine. You'll do fine. I know you will.
So, you know what it was?
He was right.
Which is frequently the case in top 40 stations back then. Of all the wild, immature disc jockeys, you were the most mature.
Sir, tell you is your job wasn't selecting which records to play; it was controlling these guys, right?
That was a big part of it. Yes,
I can imagine. Just
big part of it.
So, did they ever try to push your buttons?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, and another young man that was there, Bob Broom. Bob Broom did nights.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now we were 50,000 during the day, but at night we went back down to
1,000.
To 1,000. So I'm not sure. Did we reach Cleveland at night?
Oh yeah,
we did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Not as good, but
okay.
What was it? You said Clear Channel. What was that identification for back those days? It used to be.
Well, yeah, it was clear. Some AMs were Clear Channel. WLS in Chicago, WWL in New Orleans.
Now, what did that mean?
It means that all other stations that were daytime stations had to go off the air at sundown. You could broadcast during the daytime, but you had to go off the air. AM signal did not travel as good in the daytime because of atmospheric conditions, but it did at night. Atmospheric conditions just changed, and your signal could just go bonkers at night. And so those, when they got their license, they applied for Clear Channel because at that particular time when they applied for their license, nobody else was at a station on that particular frequency. So they asked for that to be a Clear Channel.
And back in the early days of radio, in the early part of the 20th century, the SEC set aside these certain channels to be for these big 50,000 watt stations for civil defense.
Right.
In the 20s and 30s. So if we had a national emergency and the whole country needed to be reached, WLW and WWL and WLS and WABC and all these other clear channel stations, just a handful of clear channels could reach the entire USA at night. Now, in the daytime, it was, like Johnny said, a different matter altogether. So that was the initial reason for these huge signals, 50,000 watt signals.
How did you keep these big cities from getting into Chattanooga and taking your market? What did you do to make it different here in Chattanooga?
At night?
Or anytime?
You mean for the signal?
Yeah, I mean, how did you compete with them bringing the same programming in here? I mean, what other stations were big stations could get into Cleveland?
We did have competition, WMOC, WGOW.
Yeah, we had some local competition, but he's talking about any national like WLS in Chicago.
Right.
Oh, I see.
I don't, in my mind now, we simply ignored that. It didn't become a factor. Because as a general rule, if you were tuned to the station and it went off the air, you came back to it the next day. Because there's a lot of successful daytime stations. WVOK in Birmingham, Alabama, 690 on the dial was a daytime station. But it came into Chattanooga during the daytime. You could pick it up. But, at sundown, it went off the air.
So I think the spotlights, the spectaculars,
I think
all that
local
contributed.
Identification.
Yeah, I think that's what did it.
Now, I worked in a market in Indianapolis, and most of the big Chicago stations came in 24 hours a day. Some were a little static, but they would show up in our ratings. WLS would show up. WMAQ would show up, WGN would show up. They would just have a share or two or three, which was smaller then. That was back when we were getting 10s and 15s and shares of the audience, and that was a big share. But those same stations would be number one in some suburban markets. There's a station in Detroit, which was actually in Canada, a huge top 40 station, CKLW, on 800. So they were on a great frequency. And they were number one all day long in Detroit. They were number one all day long in Toledo. They were number one all day long in Cleveland, Ohio. Wow. But the proximity of those markets with CKLW was much better for that. They didn't have it, to the north of CKLW, they didn't have a lot of radio stations to.
Was it Arbitron who was the done the marketing shares back then? It wasn't Arbitron.
Pulse Hooper?
Well, you had Hooper, and then came Pulse, and then Arbitron.
Okay. Now, what share did you have in the Chattanooga market?
It depends on which book you were looking at.
What was an average, or what was your best share?
What era?
Oh yeah, it was not uncommon for us to pull anywhere at that time, which was big numbers, between a 6 and a 10.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just gave you quarter hour shares is what it gave you.
But
at night was a different story now. Because at night, we sometimes commanded as much as 60% of the audience that was listening at night.
Yeah.
Now, in the daytime, though, you have to compare it just what? In the daytime, you might have a quarter hour might represent 10,000 people that was listening to you. At night, it could go down as much as 1,000. So if you had 66% or 60% of 1,000, that's why you use percentages. You didn't use.
You didn't tell the advertiser that particular story. You just told me.
That's correct.
I didn't think you probably shared that.
The smart ones. Yeah. The smart ones understood.
Yeah, we got 66% here. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I know US 101 back when I was in the cable business. You could buy spots at night on US 101 cheap overnight. And they said, we could sell you this many spots for this much money. And I says, well, but who's listening? Well, we got this share. Of what?
That's right, yeah.
100 people, if you got 90 share, that's okay. But
that's the rest
that's
of the
90
story.
people,
Yeah.
So,
it's all relative.
Yes, it is. So, so the other radio stations were, at that time, were country, gospel.
WDF was what we call middle of the road.
Luther was
it.
Owned the market in the morning.
Sure. Yeah.
And then a lot of folks would just.
You could take the ratings and you could look at Luther. Luther came on the air at 6 o'clock, and from 6 to 8 o'clock he dominated. By 8:30, they were starting to switch to WFLI, and by 9 o'clock we were number one. You could just measure it by 15 minutes. His audience would drop off and ours pulled up.
He done the morning news and that talk and all those things he did.
Yeah. It was just a local legend.
Yeah.
Well, and it was true here in Cleveland that Corky Whitlock, WBAC, was always a big draw. Then Tom Rowland over WCLE.
Oh yeah.
They owned that local market. Although a lot of us still went to Luther in Chattanooga, still he got a big hit. But if you wanted that very local news, you had to get Corky Whitlock and Tom Rowland.
And there was a guy that when in 1980 when WFLI went country, one of the disc jockeys that they hired was a guy from Cleveland called Cowboy.
Cowboy, George White.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Cowboy. Yeah, he had a good voice.
Yeah.
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 He come back up to WCLE after his stint down there. Yeah.
When I was at Fly, I was at college for those 5 years at University of Chattanooga, and my roommate was Keys Fellauer for all those years. My very good friend. So I spent a lot of time with Keys and Rita, his sister, and his family, holidays and weekends, and spent a lot of time up here. And you guys had great radio stations up here. I used to listen to your stations when I was.
First, US 101 started right here in Cleveland.
Yeah,
it was
that's
Q,
exactly right.
Q something.
WQLS.
QLS. There you go. That's right. Sure was. And that's Matter of fact, after they started becoming US 101, they still had to keep their office up here because of those licensing type things. I don't think they even worry about that anymore.
They don't enforce that rule anymore.
Not
Either
like
that or they're taking the rule out.
Yeah, it's just not the same anymore. Well, guys, that's pretty much. You got any final comments here? We love that 2 hours go pretty quick, don't it, when you're having fun?
Does, yeah.
Billy, you got anything?
Go Vols.
Oh, yeah, that's right. All right. Rico, how about you?
Go Mocs.
Oh, well, that's a good one, too.
I say go Crimson Tide.
Yeah, go home.
You know, the Mocs has got a young Bradley star coming down to play for you next year in football. Cole Copeland, pretty good athlete. You know, we'll see how's the transition. These good high school players get to college, and sometimes it don't transcend. But he's a gamer. He is really.
It's going to work great for him. And we've got a new football coach and a new basketball coach now, and it's a great era for UTC sports all the way around.
Sure is. It's a great program, and I think Copeland's is a wise move from an athletic standpoint. Also, from a fan base, it won't be too bad either. It'll bring some of those Bradley folks down into there. And
if we can get some folks to come to these Mocs football games instead of going up to Knoxville or going down to Tuscaloosa.
Well, we like to go down to watch the Mocs wrestling program.
Yeah.
Heath Hesslinger, a former Bradley Bear standout here, is the coach down there. Matter of fact, we did a documentary about Bradley Wrestling, who's won 26 state championships. We did one for them as a fundraiser for them, and of course Heath was. We got to go down and spend some time with Heath and record. He's very good on camera and talking. Yeah. So
thank you all for having us.
Well, thank you so much. We'll have to do this again. Start thinking about what you want to do next time you're on here. It's great. We need to do it in the wintertime too, because more people at home during the wintertime. That's when the phone rings off the wall because everybody's stuck. Of course, Joe's over there. She's drunk now. She can't call back anyway. Folks, we always try to tell everybody it's up to you to save the history in our community. The way you can do that is get those old pictures from out from up and under the bed, as they say, and get some archival ink and write on the back of that picture who's in that picture and what's in the picture. Then share those pictures with people. If you have a lot of old pictures, take them down to our Cleveland Public Library at the History Branch. She'd love to have those and put into the system we have down at the Public Library for history. It's a great thing to do there. Get out your cameras and your movie cameras and record your grandfathers, your moms, your dads, and your uncles, because when they go, history dies. So, and as Morgan and I always try to say, and I usually get my part wrong, we'll always remember Pearl Harbor, but
we remember Aunt Pearl.
We'll see you next week here on Old Town Cleveland with the Tennessee Tea Reunion Show.
There's a little girl in our neighborhood. Her name is Charlotte Johnson, and she's really looking good. I had to go and see her, so I called her on the phone. I walked over to her house, and this was going on. Her brother was on the sofa eating chocolate pie. Mama was in the kitchen cutting